3 weeks ago, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and called my life's work grandmother crafts, as if 50 years of mastery was nothing. And last night, she posted something about me online, and more than 2 million people saw it. But this isn't a revenge story. It's so much better than that. You know that feeling when someone younger looks at you like you're irrelevant? Like everything you know, everything you've lived through, belongs to some forgotten century? That feeling hit me at my son's birthday dinner. I smiled through it, but inside, something quietly broke. Sat in the center of the table, candles flickering gently, laughter moving around the room like a warm breeze. I had just shown them photos of the memorial quilt I'd finished. 40 hours of hand stitching, each square telling someone's story. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, barely looked up. She was scrolling on her phone, distracted, tapping through notifications like the world on that screen mattered more than the people sitting right there. I noticed it. Of course I did. But I told myself she was just dealing with her business, that sustainable fashion brand she worked so hard on. Michael had mentioned they'd hit a rough patch. So when the conversation paused, I took a breath and said gently, "Vanessa, honey, if you ever need help with quality control or pattern work, I spent 40 years in garment construction. I'd be happy to lend a hand." She looked up and gave me that patient smile, the kind people give older folks when they think we mean well, but don't quite understand the new world. "That's sweet, Dorothy," she said, "but we're really focused on contemporary solutions right now. Modern fashion is about innovation, technology, efficiency, not really." Her eyes glanced at my hands. "Not really grandmother crafts." The room went still. Michael shifted in his chair. Frank squeezed my hand under the table. He knew those words had cut deep. But I did what women of my generation always do. I smiled. I laughed a little. I pretended it didn't hurt. "Of course, dear, I understand." Except, inside my chest, something heavy slid into place. Every award I'd earned, every student I'd taught, every perfect seam, every custom pattern, every gown I poured my soul into, all of it, reduced to a phrase said with a smile, "Grandmother crafts." As if my entire life's work was a quaint hobby. As if I was already obsolete. Frank drove. Streetlights slid across the car windows like soft streaks of gold. He was talking, trying to make excuses for Vanessa. "She's stressed. She didn't mean it. You know how business owners get." But I wasn't listening. I was replaying her words, her tone, the way she gestured at my hands like they were relics. And the worst part? I started wondering if she was right. Fashion has changed. The world has changed. People don't buy patterns from envelopes anymore. They don't feel fabric in their hands before choosing it. They don't learn technique. They watch short videos and call it a skill. Maybe I was outdated. Maybe the things I spent my life learning truly didn't matter anymore. That thought stayed with me the whole way home. Into my sewing room, my sanctuary. The soft hum of my Juki machine still lingered from earlier. Shelves of thread in rainbow order, pattern books from decades past, fabric sorted by weight and fiber, folded with care. My hands moved across the table where Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter's graduation dress lay waiting. 17 pattern pieces, hand-bound seams, a zipper so clean it disappeared. These weren't grandmother crafts. This was engineering. This was art. This was skill earned stitch by stitch, year after year. But Vanessa's words echoed louder than the hum of any machine. Maybe my time really had passed. Maybe I was holding on to a world that didn't exist anymore. 3 weeks passed after that dinner. 3 quiet, heavy weeks. I avoided family gatherings, offered polite excuses, church events, errands, anything to create distance. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was hurt. Deeply, in a way I didn't want anyone to see. Vanessa didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence is easier than accountability. Michael called once. "Mom, you okay? We haven't seen you." "I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. Not even close. I threw myself into small projects. A baby quilt for a friend. A few alterations for church ladies. Little things. Nothing ambitious. Nothing that required me to believe I still had value. Eleanor noticed. She always does. At Quilting Circle one afternoon, she looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You've been quiet lately," she said, pinning a border with those steady hands of hers. "I'm fine," I told her. She gave me a look, the kind friends of 30 years give when they know you're lying. "Whatever it is, sitting with it won't make it better." I smiled, but inside I felt hollow, because I didn't want to talk about feeling irrelevant or invisible or outgrown by a world I once understood. One Sunday afternoon, the house was quiet. I was hand quilting, needle gliding in and out of soft cotton, the rhythm calming, almost meditative. Then I heard Frank from the living room. "Dorothy, phone. It's Michael. Says it's urgent." Urgent. My heart tightened. I picked up the phone. Michael's voice sounded strained, tight, panicked. "Mom, I need a favor." "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "It's Vanessa's business." And suddenly, my breath froze. He told me everything. The big contract, 500 dresses, make or break money. The defective shipment from the manufacturer, all of them flawed, every single piece. Returned too late, no cash flow to reorder. Consultants had tried, experts had advised, everyone said the same thing. These dresses are unsalvageable. Unsalvageable. Such a final, hopeless word. Michael continued, voice breaking. "Mom, she's going to lose everything. The business, the investment, everything we put into it." Then a pause. "Mom, I know what happened at the birthday dinner. She knows too. But please, can you just look at the dresses? Even if you can't help, at least we'll know we tried everything. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say no. To let Vanessa face the consequences of her arrogance. To let her experience what it feels like to be dismissed. A small, vindictive part of me whispered, "She called you outdated. Let her modern solutions fail." But another voice, older, steadier, stronger, spoke just as clearly. "Dorothy, you know garments. You know construction. You know flaws. You know how to fix what others throw away." My professional brain was already at work, whether I wanted it to or not. 500 dresses, multiple defects, a corporate contract. The word unsalvageable echoed in my mind, and it bothered me. In 40 years, I'd rarely seen a garment truly beyond repair. There's always a way. A hidden seam, a structural trick, a method younger designers forget exists. Still, the wound from Vanessa's words was fresh, and the idea of walking into her workspace after being dismissed so casually, it hurt more than I expected. Finally, I exhaled. Tell her Tell her I'll look at 3 sample dresses. Just an assessment, no promises. Michael exhaled like I'd lifted a boulder off his chest. "Thank you, Mom. I'll bring them tomorrow." After I hung up, I sat there in my quiet sewing room, the same room where I had once created gowns, costumes, quilts, masterpieces of thread and patience. And I wondered, was I being kind? Or setting myself up for more hurt? Was I doing this out of love? Or out of a need to prove I was still useful? Maybe a little of both. As the sun dipped below the windowsill, my eyes drifted to my sewing machine. Its metal surface glowed in the amber light. I ran my hand across it, feeling every scratch, every worn edge, marks of a lifetime of creation. Some part of me, the part that still believed in who I had been, whispered, "You can do this." Another part, the one bruised by Vanessa's words, whispered back, "But should you?" I didn't know the answer. Not then. But I would soon. Because what was coming would change everything. Not just for Vanessa, not just for her business, but for me. For my purpose. My confidence. My sense of worth. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I walked into Vanessa's warehouse for the very first time. The space felt young, minimalist shelves, bright LED lights, industrial racks with labels printed in sleek, modern fonts. I stood there for a moment, feeling out of place, like an artifact in a museum built for people who spoke a different language. Vanessa was waiting by a long table covered in dresses, hundreds of them. She looked exhausted. Eyes swollen from stress, shoulders tense, fingers nervously twisting the end of her sleeve. It struck me then. She wasn't just overwhelmed. She was scared. For a second, neither of us spoke. We just stood there. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Dorothy, I thank you for coming." Her voice trembled only slightly, but enough. I nodded. "I'm just here to look." Brooke, her business partner, stood behind her with crossed arms. Younger, assertive, confident in the kind of way that comes from believing experience doesn't matter if you have data. She didn't say hello, just watched me like she was waiting for me to break something. I placed my old sewing toolkit on the table. It looked almost vintage next to their modern workspace. Wooden handles worn smooth from decades of use, my seam ripper glinting under the lights like a small silver blade. Brooke raised an eyebrow. "We've already had professional consultants examine these," she said. I smiled politely. "I'm sure you have." I spread the first dress on the table. Immediately, the flaws jumped out at me. The grain was cut wrong, the fabric was pulling at a diagonal, the stitching was done with cheap thread, tension inconsistent, seams puckered. I ran my fingers along the hem. Raw edge, overlocked too aggressively, already unraveling. These weren't just mistakes. They were shortcuts, and shortcuts always show. "Whoever made these," I murmured, "didn't understand the fabric. Or didn't care." Vanessa swallowed. You can tell that quickly?" I said softly. "When you've spent 40 years with fabric, it tells you everything the moment you touch it." I asked for the consultant report. Vanessa handed it to me, a thick stack printed with manufacturing audit findings, supply chain analysis, contractual liabilities, factory compliance notes, cost efficiency recommendations. All very polished, all very technical, all very modern. But as I skimmed it, something became obvious. Not one page, not one paragraph mentioned repair. Not one expert tried to fix even a single dress. Their conclusion was simple: return, replace, refund, move on. I looked at Vanessa. They didn't suggest salvaging the garments? She blinked. No, they said repairing that many dresses isn't cost-effective. I nodded slowly. Of course they would say that. Modern fashion isn't about fixing. It's about replacing. But in my generation, you didn't throw away good fabric. You learned to save it. I examined 2 more dresses, then a third, all flawed, all poorly executed, but all fixable. Finally, I looked up. "Give me 3 days," I said. "All 500 dresses. If I can't make them sellable, you lose nothing but time." Vanessa stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Brooke practically choked. 3 days? For 500 dresses? That's physically impossible. Dorothy, with respect, this isn't a hobby project. These are production standards. The emphasis on "with respect" was sharp enough to cut fabric. Vanessa's expression softened, but doubt lingered. "Dorothy, I appreciate this, truly, but these dresses need modern finishing, modern quality, modern—" She stopped herself, but the word hung there, unspoken, heavy. Not old-fashioned? I released a long breath and asked quietly, "On what exactly? On a 68-year-old woman?" Brooke froze. The room went silent. I added, voice low but firm, "Quality hasn't changed, Vanessa. A properly set seam in 1975 is a properly set seam in 2025. The physics don't care about trends." For the first time, Brooke had no response. Vanessa finally looked at me, really looked at me. Not at my age, not at my hands, not at the outdated image she'd built of me, but at the person who had spent decades doing the thing her business desperately needed. And in her eyes, I saw something change. Respect, fear, hope, all tangled together. She took a breath. "Okay," she whispered. 3 days. You can try." Her voice cracked on the last word. And just like that, the weight of 500 flawed dresses settled onto my shoulders. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something new. Purpose. Frank pulled the truck up to the house a little after noon. I stepped outside, expecting a few boxes, maybe a dozen at most. But when he opened a truck bed, my heart nearly stopped. Box after box after box, sealed, stacked, labeled, towering. 500 dresses in cardboard avalanches. He unloaded them in batches, first into the garage, then the hallway, then finally my basement workshop. By the time the last box was stacked, the space looked less like a sewing room and more like a disaster relief center. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands on the railing, looking at the mountain of fabric ahead of me. A 68-year-old woman staring down a task stronger backs and younger minds had already declared impossible. For a long moment, I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. What was I thinking? 3 days, 500 dresses, corporate-level quality. Physically, mentally, realistically, I should have said no. Vanessa's dismissive smile flashed in my mind. Grandmother crafts. Brooke's skepticism echoed behind it. This isn't a hobby project. My hands tightened on the railing. Doubt pressed against my ribs like a weight. Maybe I had made a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe age really did matter. Maybe I wasn't capable anymore. For a moment, I felt very, very small. But then, a tiny spark inside me flickered. I hadn't built a 40-year career by panicking. I'd built it by systems, by order, by understanding fabric like breathing air. I stepped forward, opened the first box. Gently, I lifted the first dress onto my cutting table, and with that movement, the panic faded, replaced by something older, steadier, stronger. The part of me that knew exactly what to do took over. I created categories. Level 1, simple fixes, loose hems, sloppy seams. Level 2, structural errors, twisted grain, misaligned panels. Level 3, severe issues, flawed facings, collapsing bodices, tension failures. Each dress was tagged, sorted, stacked. 30 dresses in, I noticed patterns. Same mistakes, same shortcuts, same careless construction. This wasn't 500 unique disasters. This was a factory of mass-produced flaws. And flaws, when repeated, can be corrected with repeated solutions. That realization lit something in me. I wasn't facing 500 problems. I was facing 5 problems, repeated 100 times each. Suddenly, in my mind, systems aligned. French seams for the weak side stitching, bias correcting adjustments for twisted grain, reinforce gussets for stress points, recut facings for puckered edges, proper pressing to reshape collapsed structure. In that moment, the impossible became maybe possible? But then reality struck again. 3 days, 72 hours, 500 garments. Even with perfect efficiency, I would need more than 100 hours of work. Alone, it couldn't be done. The realization pressed into me like a stone. I was strong, experienced, capable, But I wasn't 20 anymore, or 30, or even 50. My back already ached just from sorting. For the first time since Michael's call, I considered something I hadn't wanted to admit. I couldn't do this alone. But who could I ask? Who would help me fix dresses for a woman who had dismissed all of us as out of touch? My mind drifted to Eleanor, to Harriet, to Lorraine. 3 women I had known for decades, each with skills the world had quietly forgotten. Would they even say yes? Should I even ask? Pride tried to stop me, but purpose pushed harder. This wasn't about proving Vanessa wrong anymore. This was about proving something to myself. I picked up the phone, dialed Eleanor first. When she answered, I didn't know where to begin. Eleanor, I've gotten myself into something ridiculous. I explained everything. The dismissal, the dresses, the 3-day deadline, the overwhelming mountain of work sitting in my basement. For a moment, there was silence. Then Eleanor laughed, a warm, familiar sound, the kind only old friends can give without being cruel. She said, "Remember the charity auction? 47 quilts in 2 weeks. Same thing, just with zippers." "We were in our 50s then," I reminded her. "So what?" she said. "We're smarter now." That made me smile. "Call Harriet and Lorraine," she said. "I'll be there in an hour." I stared at the phone after she hung up. It was happening. Help was coming. Real help. Old help. The kind that knew craft, not shortcuts. My basement, once overwhelming, now seemed possible. In an hour, the room would fill with the hum of machines, the whisper of scissors through fabric, the laughter of women who had spent lifetimes mastering skills nobody respected anymore. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something blooming inside me. Strength, community, sisterhood, hope, and the faint understanding that maybe, just maybe, Vanessa was about to learn what real craftsmanship looks like. An hour later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there they were. Eleanor with her ever-present tote bag, Harriet with a tape measure around her neck like jewelry, and Lorraine carrying a thermos the size of a small child. They stepped into the house like they'd done it 1,000 times before, because they had. But this time, they were walking into something none of us had ever tried. We made our way down to the basement. They stopped halfway down the stairs. Rows of boxes, dresses piled, stacked, labeled, racks already filling with half-sorted garments. Harriet let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, "this is either the best idea you've ever had, or the craziest." Lorraine walked straight to the nearest rack, fingers already pinching fabric, testing seams, the way some people check fruit at the market. "Off grain," she muttered. "Cheap thread. No pressing. This is a crime against textiles." Eleanor just put her hands on her hips and took it all in. "Where do you want us?" she asked. No drama, no hesitation, just readiness. I handled the most complex reconstructions and quality control on finished pieces. We moved like we'd done this our whole lives. Because we had. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was choreography. We examined seams, corrected grain, fixed puckers, strengthened stress points. We didn't just repair. We improved. These dresses weren't just being saved. They were being made better than when they left the factory. A few hours in, a rhythm emerged. I'd hear the snip of Lorraine's scissors, the steady whir of Harriet's machine, the soft, precise hand-stitching from Eleanor's corner. We traded short comments back and forth. Who did this hem? A toddler with a glue gun? Fixing this much bad sewing should count as community service. If the manufacturer saw this, they'd weep. We laughed. We worked. We focused. By midnight of day 1, we had 60 dresses fully corrected and hanging neatly on a rack. 60 out of 500. We were proud and terrified. At around 1 a.m., we took a break. We sat on old stools and folding chairs, hands sore, backs aching, surrounded by fabric and thread and the faint smell of steam from the iron. Eleanor broke the silence. "You know what this feels like?" she said. "For the first time in a long time, I feel needed. Not as a grandmother, not as a volunteer, but for what I actually know how to do." Harriet nodded. "When I retired from the costume shop, everyone told me to enjoy your rest. Like I was a machine turned off. Nobody ever asked if I missed creating something that mattered." Lorraine sighed, rubbing her wrists. "I spent 30 years upholstering furniture. People sat in my work every day of their lives. Then one day it was like, thanks, we'll buy cheap now. We can just replace it. Nobody wants to repair. Nobody wants to preserve. They just toss and move on." She paused. "This feels different," she added softly. "This feels like being taken seriously again." I listened to them and realized they were talking about the same thing I'd been afraid to admit. It wasn't just our hands that were being dismissed. It was our lives, our years, our effort, our quiet mastery. And in this basement, surrounded by flawed dresses, we were stitching more than fabric back together. We were stitching ourselves. Day 2 started before sunrise. We put on coffee, turned on the machines, and picked up right where we'd left off. I showed Harriet a French seam technique that encloses raw edges completely. "This takes more time," I told her, "but it lasts longer than the fabric." She tested it, grinned. "Why don't manufacturers do this?" she asked. "Because it costs 5 minutes more," I said. "And 5 minutes times thousands of garments costs money." Lorraine called me over. "These side seams keep twisting," she said. "I fix one, another goes crooked." I ran my fingers along the fabric grain. "They cut it off grain at the factory," I said. "The fabric is fighting the shape. We can't win by forcing it. We partially deconstructed the seams, reset them along the true grain, blended the corrections into the design. Slow, careful, precise. You could feel the difference just looking at the dresses. On one rack, the untouched versions sagged and twisted. On the other, our corrected ones hung like they belonged in a boutique. By late evening, our bodies started to protest. Eleanor's fingers trembled after too many hours of delicate stitching. We made her take breaks, but she'd sneak back in, whispering, I'm fine, I've done worst at Christmas." Harriet stretched her back every half hour, grimacing as she straightened. Lorraine's shoulders tightened, her old upholstery muscles waking up in ways they hadn't in years. As for me, my neck ached, my shoulders burned, my hands cramped. We were older, no denying it. But every time one of us thought about stopping, we'd glance at the growing rack of finished dresses. Strong seams, balanced grain, clean lines. Proof. Proof that we still had it. Proof that age had not stolen our skill, only hidden it away where nobody thought to look. By the time we finally stopped, we had completed 350 dresses. 350. 150 left. 1 day to go. We stood near the racks, silent for a moment, just looking. Harriet broke the quiet. "These," she said, gesturing at the finished dresses, "are what they should have looked like in the first place." Eleanor nodded. "And they wouldn't if some old-fashioned grandmothers hadn't stepped in." We laughed, but there was weight under the humor. I went to bed that night exhausted, bones aching, hands throbbing. And yet inside, beneath the fatigue, was a quiet flame. We were so close. But a question lingered. Even if we pulled this off, would anyone really understand what it took? Or would it just be another shipment, another product, another blip in Vanessa's business story? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. We weren't done yet. Day 3 began with urgency pounding through my veins. 150 dresses remaining. 1 day left before shipment. One more chance to prove that our age was not our weakness, but our strength. We worked like we were 20 again. Fast, focused, precise. Every seam clean. Every hem sharp. Every dress checked twice. We were in a rhythm of mastery, until suddenly the basement door opened. Brooke walked in. Her footsteps echoed as she descended the stairs and stopped at the bottom like she'd seen a crime scene. "What is this?" she said. The disgust in her voice hit like a slap. Rows of dresses, thread everywhere, 4 women over 60 working with the intensity of a factory floor. But instead of awe, she looked horrified. "Dorothy," she said slowly, "our brand is about modern sustainability, professional production, ethical manufacturing. We can't send customers dresses that came from someone's basement. Made by grandmothers?" The word landed heavy, bitter, dismissive. My jaw tightened. I set down my iron slowly. "What exactly," I asked softly, "is offensive about seniors?" Brooke blinked. "It's not the age," she stammered. "It's the brand image. We can't depend on—" She waved her hand vaguely at us. "This." Translation: we can't depend on older women. We can't trust experience. We can't acknowledge skill unless it looks young. Before I could reply, Eleanor stood up, barely 5'2", but suddenly towering. "You want to talk about quality standards?" she said, voice sharp as a needle. "Look at the dress your manufacturer sent." She held one up. Crooked seams, puckered bodice, raveling hem. Then she held up one of ours. Smooth, balanced, elegant. "Tell me," she asked, "which one would you wear?" Brooke stepped closer, frowning. She examined a seam, checked the drape, pulled gently at the side. Her expression shifted, skepticism melting into something like respect. Finally, she said, "These are better than the originals." I didn't smile. I just said, "Then let us finish." She didn't apologize, but she didn't stop us either. And that was enough. We worked until our bodies ached. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Lorraine finished the last seam at 2:47 a.m. She set her needle down and whispered, "Done." We stood in a circle surrounded by 500 dresses that had once been called unsalvageable. We were trembling with fatigue, hands numb, eyes burning, but inside, we were glowing. Harriet looked around at the finished racks. "I haven't worked this hard in 20 years," she said. Eleanor laughed, "And I've never been prouder." I was too tired to speak, but my heart felt full in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Later that morning, Frank helped me load the van. 500 dresses, neatly boxed, labeled, documented. When we arrived at Vanessa's warehouse, she was waiting. Eyes red, hands trembling nervously. I opened the first box and lifted out a dress. She held it gently, like it might crumble in her hands. Her eyes scanned the seams, checked the hem, held it up against the light. Then she looked at me. "Dorothy," her voice cracked. This is perfect." She checked another, and another, each one flawless. "It's better than the samples we approved," she whispered. Brooke joined her, examining the inner facings with a magnifying light. "How did you... you fixed everything." I handed her my documentation. Every repair is listed, every method explained, recommendations included. Vanessa swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw gratitude in her eyes. Real gratitude. Not forced, not polite. Real. The dresses shipped, we waited. And then, 3 days later, Michael called. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "you need to see this." He sent me a screenshot, an Instagram review. "I need to talk about this dress. The construction quality is unreal. The seam finishing? Expert level. Feels like couture. This is not fast fashion. This is craftsmanship." The post had over 1,000 likes. More reviews followed. You can feel the quality. Beautiful construction. Finally, a brand that cares. Influencers noticed. Fashion bloggers noticed. Even designers commented. Whoever fixed these dresses knows real technique. Every review felt like a stitch repairing something inside me I didn't realize was torn. Then came the moment that changed everything. A sustainable fashion influencer asked Vanessa, "What changed in your production? Your quality is suddenly incredible." Vanessa could have taken credit. She could have called it a new process, a brand upgrade, a strategic improvement. But she didn't. Instead, she posted a picture of me in my basement, surrounded by dresses, thread, and sewing machines. The caption began, "I need to tell you something." She told the entire story, the dismissal, the mistake, the crisis, the 3-day rescue, the 4 older women who saved her business with skills modern factories forgot. She ended with, "What I called outdated was mastery." The post went viral. 2.3 million views, thousands of comments, messages from seniors saying they cried, from younger people thanking us, from industry professionals praising our work. For the first time, the world saw us, not as grandmothers, not as relics, not as outdated, but as experts. Vanessa came to my house a week later, not to apologize, though she did, not out of guilt, though she felt it. She came as family. She asked me to become her quality consultant, to train her team, to teach what I knew. I agreed, but only if Eleanor, Harriet, and Lorraine were included and paid fairly. Soon, we launched a heritage collection, garments made with traditional techniques that honored the thousands of hours we had spent mastering our craft. It became her best-selling line. We began teaching young designers, passing on knowledge, saving techniques the world was about to lose. Our age, once dismissed, became our greatest advantage. And for the first time, in a long time, I felt seen, truly seen. So here is what I want you to hear. When someone calls you old-fashioned, when they dismiss your skills, when they act like your time has passed, remember this. They are not seeing your limits. They are revealing their own. Your experience is not obsolete. Your knowledge is not outdated. Your lifetime of practice is not a weakness. It is your power. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and speed, real quality, real craftsmanship, real wisdom comes from people who have lived long enough to understand what truly matters. So if someone makes you feel irrelevant, stand tall. Because one day, the world will need exactly what only you have spent a lifetime learning. And when that day comes, just like us, you will be ready.